Hey guys, welcome back to Hayes Tech. Today we're going to be making some upgrades to an iMac Pro. Full disclosure, this was not my project or my iMac Pro that we were working on. I was invited to help my girlfriend's father upgrade his iMac Pro. He had purchased a refurbished base model iMac Pro and wanted to get a better system at a better price point than Apple was providing. I want to mention that this is not a guide for how to do this. If anything, this is a warning to not do this because you could seriously brick your components. In fact, we actually did, unfortunately. It's a very expensive project, and unless you are an industry professional that really knows what they're doing, you're gonna have a bad time. Our first task in this project was to simply get inside the Mac Pro, which is easier said than done. You actually have to remove the entire screen, which is one place that things can immediately go south. Fortunately, we didn't have any issues, but it was very tedious.
Hey!
Next up, we had to remove all the extra bits. Everything that was under that screen that we just removed had to come out. So that included the two speaker channels on either side. Those are the big black boxes. The hard drive, which is the big silver box there in the middle. The motherboard and power supply, which are the two exposed circuit boards that you see there, as well as the CPU fan, which sits right on top of the main motherboard. After getting everything out of the chassis of the computer, we started to make all of our upgrades, and this is where we ran into our first issue. Apple uses a proprietary connector for what Apple calls a fusion drive, which is really just an SSD accelerated hard drive. So you saw us take the hard drive out earlier, and this is an SSD that is small and accelerates the load times for your hard drive. You see this in other things such as Intel Optane. Unfortunately, because Apple uses a proprietary connector, we could not connect the standard M.2 SSD that we had purchased prior to these upgrades. So unfortunately, that ruled out one of the major upgrades that we were going to be making to the system. After that unfortunate realization, we moved on with high hopes that we would be able to complete the rest of the upgrades. Spoiler alert, that didn't really work out. So we started to remove the heatsink for the CPU and the GPU so that we could make our CPU upgrade. And aside from it being tensioned down really tight and being kind of finicky to get off, nothing really went wrong here. But it was a hassle, and we did have to wrestle with it for quite a considerable amount of time. But we did get it off in the end. After we removed our heatsink, we had to clean off and reapply the thermal compound, which is used to conduct heat from the CPU and GPU to the heat sink, which will then cool the system in turn. This is best practice if you're going to be doing any sort of computer upgrade. This is a really good idea to do because the existing thermal compound, when you put it back on, simply won't work as well as it did initially. So always reapply, which you can see us doing here. After installing the new CPU, we attempted to reassemble the heatsink back onto the motherboard. Unfortunately, things never run as smoothly as we hope. So we did run into a few issues. The CPU tension spring that holds the CPU firmly in place and against the contacts that connect it to the motherboard was really tight. And if you screw it on incorrectly, the CPU will probably move out of alignment. This is what happened in our case while we were reinstalling the CPU. And this can cause all sorts of problems, not the least of which is breaking your CPU. So after several attempts of trying to get the CPU back in place, we ended up bending some of the pins to the point where we weren't able to straighten them back out. This sort of issue is not unique to the iMac or even just Apple devices in general. This is something that you could experience on any sort of computer that you build. So it is important that when you're installing your CPU, you use caution to make sure you don't mess it up, because that is the heart of your build and likely one of the most expensive components. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I learned a lot in this process, even if it was ultimately unsuccessful. If you want to replicate this project, I would really recommend against doing that. We had 3 industry professionals in the room and we still broke it. So if you're wanting to buy an iMac, I would recommend buy the spec that you need, maybe with less RAM, because that's a really easy upgrade to do yourself and it'll save you a fair bit of money. But other than that, I really appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to do all the YouTube stuff down below, and I will see you guys in the next video.